Thomas Dimitroff is a two-time Super Bowl champion, an executive in the National Football League. Who was former director of college scouting, general manager, started as a scout and then a national scout, and he joins us on G&D. We had him on several months back to talk about Dan Quinn, who we knew very well. We worked side by side with in Atlanta. Found out he was also very close with Adam Peters. So we wanted to check back in with Thomas, who's given us a few minutes here on The Fan. Thanks so much for the time. How are you?
G&D, I'm happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. Got it. We're fired up to talk with you again. The boys are balling out in Washington, D.C. so far. Peters' first season as a GM going swimmingly. Dan Quinn's culture he's establishing, working to perfection. What do you make of how some of your former peers are handling themselves here in the district?
Let me say it does not surprise me. First of all, with Dan Quinn, I mean, you think about Dan, you think about coming into that organization where, no offense to some of the people that were there before, good football people. However, there needed to be the culture change and the adjustment. That is Dan Quinn through and through. You guys know that, even being around him. You want to talk about getting you ramped up as a media person, let alone when you're in that building. I know what he's doing. I mean, Dan Quinn, I've heard our scouts over the many years. I've never met a head coach who's more functional with the entire organization than the coach that we had here at Atlanta back in the day. Can only imagine that's where he is. So culture for him, turning that around that way and having people believe in him and the players, you can only imagine people are buying in 100%.
Yeah. So beyond that, I mean, because I think that's a major thing, Thomas. Why has this worked so well? I think it exceeded everyone's expectations. I think if you gave them truth serum in the building, they'd say, yeah, it's probably going better than we even thought it would to this point where they are. Why has this all worked so well?
I think it works so well because Dan comes in as authenticity guy. So he's true about it. Sometimes people think, oh, it's too good to be true. He's so positive and so in your face, upbeat, but that is him. He will fight you if he needs to, which I think is great, but he'll do it with a pat on the back after when he needs to bring you back. He just has a very good knack of doing that and leading the troops. And again, given a situation that you guys were in before, it just is appropriate for him to come in that way. A lot of times in the NFL, you know this. You get a coach in a situation a certain way, it needs something from a different perspective to come in. When Dan came into Atlanta, guys, we came off of Mike Smith, excellent head coach, but we needed a change in style and approach, and it was just a really smooth transition. I see it the same thing with the Commanders.
How do they continue the momentum and sustain this? Now, they've got new ownership, a new GM, a new head coach, and a new quarterback who's been electrifying, and it feels like everything is brand new and is working. But 5-2 through 7 games, while quite an accomplishment, it's probably easier, frankly, than finishing this season that way or doing it again next year. Like, how do they continue to put the bricks on top of one another?
Well, let me first start by saying, you know how important it is to have a head coach and a GM on the same wavelength. You know, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, I think it's a really, really ideal matchup. Those two function well together. They communicate well. There's not a tug on personalities and egos of those two guys. They work well together. I think that's vital. I think going into the rest of the season, when you're talking about purely on the logistics and the scheme and the approach to what they have, I mean, obviously what they need to do is continue to work on that defense a little bit. That pass defense needs to be adjusted. You might want to talk a little bit about potential trade situations. We can talk about that later. I think making sure that defense continues to function and improve all the time, get some more pass rush, get the pass defense rocking and rolling a little bit more, and then continue to hopefully you'll get your quarterback soon back to the offensive side. Continue to be very smart about how you use this quarterback. I got such upside. I think what Dan and Cliff Kingsbury are doing right now, to me, it's ideal. Don't throw too many balls, but get them enough high percentage shots, get them running a little bit. Stay creative on the offense and keep that offense functioning as it is. I mean, they're ranked 4 right now, right? They're functioning well as a rushing team. Keep passing the ball. Be mindful of attempts per game, but be smart about, making sure your high percentage shots are there. Limit the giveaways. They're tied for 3rd right now in total giveaways. Remember, guys, that is a massively important thing. Keep playing smart football. Keep being consistent, and I think they have a chance to run it deep.
Sumer Sports, Thomas Dimitroff with us. Then to that end, Thomas, how would you handle this trade deadline? Because I get it. Maybe I had a schedule, but you don't apologize for your success. you're here. They got a long-term plan, it seems, tons of cap space, a full allotment of draft picks going to next year. Would you say, you know what, we're here, let's go for it, or would you be more cautious?
Look, I keep trumpeting this, and I think the Raiders fans are going to be agitated with me, but I know Dan Quinn. I know Dan Quinn loves legit pass rushers. I'm talking game-breaking pass rushers. You know where I'm going with this. To ever see a guy like Maxx Crosby come in there pushing that to continue to build because, you know, they have a little bit of age on that pass rushing side too. I think that would be an ideal fit. Now, I know everyone in Detroit wants him there, and I think there are people in Atlanta that want him here. But I think the mix, Maxx Crosby and Dan Quinn, you don't think your city would go nuts over that? I think that's an amazing throw around. I also think someone like Denzel Ward would be someone you'd consider. You want to continue to build that pass defense, maybe a guy like that's available. Keep working on that defense. I know there are people out there wanting maybe a receiver on the offensive side. I think some of the receivers kind of have already gone their own way. I don't know necessarily who that would be on the receiver side. I still would consider it. I think you should be a player given where that organization is right now.
Put yourself in Adam Peters' seat, and you know Adam. Obviously, you guys were together in New England at one point in time. But when you talk Crosby, I mean, that's a home run. That's a grand slam, right? Would you be that aggressive in your first year? I mean, is there any thought to, we got all the money in the world this offseason, second most in the league, we got all the draft picks, let's wait, regroup, see where we are? Or are you kind of aggressively going, no, I got the quarterback, I got the team, let's not waste time on the rookie contract, let's go now, even though we're in year one and we're ahead of schedule?
All right, I was about ready to throw in an expletive here in the F, but I was going to say this is a not for long, you know, in parens, effing long league. I mean, man, I think you capitalize again. I'm not getting out of their means, of course, not getting ahead of the skis, et cetera, et cetera. I think you really have to seriously look at it, right? You just never know. Yes, you have the quarterback, and you could sit back and be conservative about it in your own way and say, let's just see how this plays out. That's not Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn has always been on the front edge of our rosters. Whenever we talked about it, it was never about, we're good here, let's just stay here. It had always been, in all of my years with him in Atlanta, it didn't matter if it was the lower level of the practice squad all the way up. He was always looking respectfully to improve that roster. And if he had a moment and an opportunity to do such, it was a serious consideration. Now, Adam Peters might need to be the guy that keeps it in check a little bit. That's part of his job. But if there are opportunities to continue to build this football team with the momentum they have right now, again, I am for it. There are other teams out there, by the way, that I would never think about that. I think this is one that they have to seriously look at it, given their financial situation as well.
Did you guys ever face anything like this in Atlanta where you were ahead of schedule or something? The team was maybe better than you'd planned for? I mean, you had so many huge double-digit win seasons there that you did kind of make a go-for-it transaction. I'm trying to think back.
No, I would say, look, we considered a lot of it. We were really getting a momentum in year 16, of course, in 2016. We got to the Super Bowl, of course. We kind of messed that up down the stretch. And I think, by the way, that's one of the things that Dan, and I or anyone involved would have learned through that time. No, I think it was more being really active on the other side, being very regular about bringing players in on the Tuesdays, working people out, seeing if we could upgrade the roster. So I know it is in his makeup, but we didn't look at it this way. We didn't always remember, financially, Arthur Blank and how we approached it there and how I approached it, we were always one of the big players. We were always one of the big spenders, right? We were always probably the third or fourth top spender. So we didn't have a whole bunch of money at this time of year where I don't know the exact number you guys have there in Washington. What is it right now? What's the space?
So at the moment, it's around 25 million in cap space. Next year, it's around 100.
Isn't that amazing? That's what you want.
Yeah.
I don't, man. I'm just saying. I think you got to seriously think about being aggressive with it.
I would love that. It would be fun for this town because it would really, to your point, I think we're all kind of saying, oh, it's early in this period, but you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who gets hurt in preseason next year. If the flow is different for the team, you start out 1-2, you got a tough schedule. What we know right now, Thomas, is the division's not very good. Dallas and Philly have not proven to be very solid. And the conference itself is pretty wide open. So why not?
Yeah, I think again, I think you have two men there, and Adam Peters and Dan Quinn putting that team together. They juxtapose, and I think they're just a really good mix. I think they're gonna keep each other in check that way. However, you have an owner who is open, and I think it's great for the community as well. I do want to say that I know that they will do their due diligence in trying to decide whether it is of sound mind or not. Again, I'm getting out there saying Maxx Crosby again, but you know how I think that could be an aggressive move. It may not be what's in Adam Peters' best in his mind, but he may be thinking about it.
Thomas Dimitroff of Sumer Sports with us here on Grant and Danny. Answer me this, and you'll know better than any guest we could have on. So I have always talked about the NFL. I thought it was weird because the trade deadline has kind of always been a nothing burger. And it's nothing like the other sports, NBA, Major League Baseball, whatever, where it was kind of this holiday as a fan, and there was a ton of trades and a lot of activity, and star names are going from one team to another. I will say the last few years in the NFL, it is trending more like the other sports. We had DeAndre Hopkins traded today. There have been a plethora of moves already this year, and it really is getting more and more that way. But it's always been a big conversation like, oh, what if they traded for this guy? Or what about that team doing this? And then nothing ever happened. So two-part question. Why has that always been the case that the trades, especially for impact players in season, just don't happen? And second, why is that changing here over the last couple of years, do you think?
So first of all, when you think about the stats, probably 2016, 17, 18, during that area, probably averaged, if I'm not mistaken, in the sevens. We're now doubling it over the last couple of years, right? 14 plus 0.53, whatever it is, as far as trades. I will say it's still nowhere near where maybe it should be and where it's going to go in the years to come. I think if you brace yourself, I think it's going to continue to get more and more over the years. There are a lot more aggressive general managers with this younger group than it used to be. A lot of the older school GMs would sit back, not being lazy about it, just more conservative about it. In today's world, I mean, look, I like to think I was one of those people that started it with a lot of big time trades, starting with Julio Jones back in 11, right? A lot of movement. Les Snead has made a lot of moves. Howie Roseman has made a lot of moves. The Rams and, of course, the Eagles and a lot of other GMs are thinking about it. Back to not for long. I think these guys are thinking about a lot more aggressively than they ever have. I would say I was always vehemently opposed in the maybe 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I didn't want anyone to leave our building. If they were good guys, I wanted them there. It was tough for me to think about them leaving. And a lot of times the people that were coming available back then were either character issue guys or they were declining. They still might have had a name, but people weren't playing in that world. Now some people are coming available and they're on the market because people are thinking, okay, financially we need to move this guy even though we love him. And I just think there's going to be more of that. And that's why you're going to continue to see more of that, again, given the combination of abilities out there, and it's happening more, and the aggressive general manager mindset.
How much did you look at, or would you look at even now, the landscape of your own division when it came to making moves or not? In other words, if you're the tallest of the molehills, you don't need to make a move, or maybe you think we need to. Like, how would that influence thinking there for you, Thomas?
You're saying within the division?
Yeah,
or
just sort of looking
talking about.
Yeah, just in the NFC North where everyone's loaded.
And that's
versus...
yeah. How would you view it differently? Like, in other words, if Washington's the best of a bad division, I'm not saying it is, but if they were, would that change your thinking versus I'm in a crowded division where everyone's going to win at least 10 games? Like, how would that change your thinking, or would it?
I don't think it would. I think it becomes something that you discuss within your organization. It comes down to your team builders and your general manager and your head coach. Of course, your owner has to chime in. But I've always taken a lot of pride in that role to say, look, this is going to be our approach. We're going to be aggressive to this point. I believe that Dan and Adam are having those discussions, whether it's a good division or not a good division. Of course, you want to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. I get it. But I think you just have to be mindful of what's out there. Look, some of the biggest mistakes have been made because of an excess push on need. I'll raise my hand on some of the biggest mistakes I made. Most GMs will say that. Most head coaches will. I don't think there's an excessive need there at Washington. So I don't think it's one of those situations where they're just flailing around making a grab at someone because they think they need that to survive. They are operating well. They think they can bring someone in who can continually help them rise to the occasion. That's a good thing. Don't get out beyond and start making the wrong choices because you need someone badly.
Were you with Kingsbury at all?
I know Cliff well over the years. We did not spend time together,
Okay.
but for being in New England back in the day.
That's what I was wondering if you guys cross paths in New England. But I bring that up to say, my goodness, has he done an amazing job with this offense? Even when Daniels, who is an MVP candidate, wasn't available for 3 quarters against Carolina, they scored 30 points and didn't miss a beat with Mariota this past week. A, what do you think of the offense he's designed? And B, is that a guy who we should worry about becoming a head coaching candidate again in the near future?
Well, like Cliff, I think he's a very smart guy in a lot of ways. And I know he's taken his heat over the years and people have their comments. I think what he's done a really good job of this year, and we ran a lot of this data without getting to a ton of Sumer Sports where I'm working right now, and a lot of the data on how he had a trend of playing that receiver, the top number one receiver on the left side of the formation a lot. And he's not doing that as much now. I think he's becoming quite a bit more creative. I think he and Dan Quinn have probably talked about this a lot. I think Cliff comes in and he's seemingly a lot more, again, he's adjusting a lot more. And I love what they're doing this year. Again, knowing that they have a quarterback, again, attempts per game, guys, tied for 28th and still 13th in the league in passing. Again, I know Mariota played last week. They utilized a quarterback who is very good. What are we talking? 75-ish%. They are putting that quarterback in the right spot. They're running the ball well with Robinson, right? I just think that the way that he's putting together this offense is impressive. It's consistent. He knows where they're thriving. He also knows where he has to sort of slow a little bit down and not expect the world. And I think that's a really good opportunity for him to show who he is. Look, third downs, they're third overall. I think they've done a great job there. Pressures allowed, they're still top 10. What do they think? I think around 8th in pressures allowed. I just think the way that offense is coming together, given a very good quarterback who moves around well, I think they're capitalizing as much as they can, and that is kudos to Cliff.
Yeah, and I want to give some more roses to Cliff here for a second, Thomas, but by mentioning somebody else. You go back over his history. He's had good running games when his quarterback, Kyler Murray, was scrambling all over the place, and that was a huge part of it. But that's not what he's known for. This run game, non-sort of quarterback keeper division, to me, I think Anthony Lynn is an underrated element of this staff because that guy knows running games. Like, maybe as a head coach, you could have used some more diversity there in terms of play calling and offensive design. But I feel like having him on that staff, it can't be a coincidence that they are thumping people and running really effectively. Give me your thoughts there.
No, they're running really effectively. I mean, 165 plus yards, a game, whatever that may be. I mean, what are they yards per play? 5.5 or 5 something. Those are good numbers. Anthony Lynn is a fantastic. Yes, 100% when you start talking about, having a run game and an understanding of the run game. Love how they're playing it. I think it embodies what they want there as well. Dan Quinn, he's a fighter. He's a boxing guy too, right? Mm-hmm. Just to pull some of that. I just love his toughness. And he wants a tough-ass team. He wants a team that's going to rock it if they need to, but he also wants the finesse of prime athletes, which is what he's always been about.
I'll let you out on this one because we could keep you, but we can't. We've already taken up too much of your time. But Jaden Daniels, he's questionable. He didn't practice today. We don't know if he's going to practice throughout the week. Didn't break the rib. Dan Quinn has kind of been coy and saying it's a rib injury. They're hopefully he plays. How would you handle him knowing it's 7 games into this career the way he's looked?
Well, that it's a rib injury, guys, and it's not something else catastrophic that you're on the verge of. I think that's the difference. I think a lot of, tough-ass quarterbacks out there, guys who are resilient, are going to want to play. Now, we could see if he gets in there and all of a sudden he's aching, he can't make the throws because he can't twist the way he wants. Then I think they need to make the adjustment back potentially to Mariota. I would love to see him get in there. I think it sends a great message if he can. Again, I wouldn't push it. I'm not that worried about playing him this week and thinking it's going to injure, his progress at all. I just would be mindful. I'd keep it up until the very last minute and make that decision. And again, it's not an injury that's going to take you over and put you out for, obviously a season.
Tom's great with us as always, man. Really appreciate the time.
Appreciate you guys.